Well, howdy, and welcome to Conversations with Coyotes. My name is Bravado, I am a coyote, and this is The Conversation. If you're watching this video, I assume that, like me, you find yourself spending a fair amount of time on furry social media. And as with social media in general, furry tends to cycle through topics of interest every couple days or so. Sometimes it's an image meme, aka draw your character in this and nothing else. Sometimes it's related to world events, but just as often can be randomly pulled from what seems like a dozen or so recurrent hot topics to the point where we've coined the term wheel of furry discourse, as these frequently seem to be about as predictable as such a contraption might imply. And while there are plenty of variations of this floating around with lots of overlap between them, I've chosen this example because it's conveniently landed on the discourse that I want to talk about today: being too old for the furry fandom. Now, before we get started in earnest, why do these things even keep coming up? Well, it's obvious that many of the topics in question are ones that we feel strongly about one way or another, and so they're always simmering on the back burner until some random, poorly thought out statement pushes them back into our collective consciousness. It's often very easy to follow the trail back to whatever hot take is responsible thanks to screenshots or quote retweets, but occasionally whatever caused the topic du jour to awaken from its fitful, cursed slumber seems to disappear into the ether, leaving only the aftershocks. Oftentimes, the catalyst is someone with limited reach expressing their frustration in a less than diplomatic way, but all it takes is to catch the eye of someone with exponentially more followers to blow everything up. This results in a situation where the rebuttal ends up far louder than the original sentiment, to the point where sometimes it's all you see. Such was the case with the most recent round of too old for the fandom tweets, where every comment I saw on the subject was in defense of the older members of the community, talking about how furry wouldn't exist without him. This is 100% true, by the way, and I agree that it's important to recognize how furry or any community like this is an ongoing project built on the efforts of those who came before us. At the same time, when the discourse mostly consists of morally outraged responses and the instigating comments are nowhere to be found, the whole thing turns a corner into the self-indulgent and even counterproductive. There's no question that furry is not without its share of actual, real problems. But as someone who really only got into the fandom when I was already in my 30s, it's difficult for me to agree that ageism within furry is anywhere near the epidemic it gets painted as. I know it's anecdotal, but after nearly a decade of heavy involvement in the community and countless interactions with folks from all different generations, I struggle to think of even a single time where my age was a limiting factor. Before I continue, it's super important to make a distinction here. As I creep closer and closer to my 40s, there have been plenty of times I've personally felt as though I'm too old to participate in a particular activity or learn a particular skill. The key word there is felt. It's a limitation I myself have imposed, and not one that has come from anyone but me. You personally feeling as though you're too old for the furry fandom is very different from some other person or group making a similar assertion, but too often the two end up conflated, and that leads to these sorts of "woe is me, nobody wants gray muscles in the fandom" pity parties that aren't really grounded in reality. I get it, believe me. It's frustrating to feel as though you're being excluded from something you care about due to circumstances beyond your control. But I don't think that's what's really happening here. It'll come as no surprise that furry is continuously evolving. While people of all ages are constantly discovering and joining the fandom, at any given time the majority of them are on the younger side. And with this influx of new people comes the sensibilities of a new generation, how they communicate, what they enjoy, their sense of humor. It's all part of their identities, and now it's being smushed into the aggregate of the furry experience we already know and turning it into something new and different. And this happens over and over, so if you've been in the fandom a while, you've likely seen it change quite a bit compared to what it was when you first joined. Now, I see age 30 being thrown around a lot as the point at which people joke about being ejected from furry, and I don't think this is random. We tend to think of turning 30 as a big milestone, mostly because it's seen as the age at which we can no longer plausibly include ourselves as the youth and have to acknowledge that our opinions on pop culture are less cool and relevant than they once were. But I have good news, that's not entirely true. Because that'll have already happened when you turn 25. Sorry. Anyway, if you, like so many other folks, joined furry during high school or college, you'll have been in the fandom roughly a decade by the time your 30th birthday rolls around. That's a long time, and you'll have witnessed a lot of change even if you didn't necessarily notice until an arbitrary milestone popped up and shoved it in your face, bringing with it a surprise existential crisis. But the point here is that you would have joined at a time when you were part of the most catered to, cared about age group, not just in furry, but on the whole, and now, as you say goodbye to your 20s, you ain't. And so it's true that there's nothing you can really do about this in the sense that time will continue to pass whether you like it or not. You'll continue to get older, and the landscape of furry will continue to change. And life will go on. Because as much as it may feel like it, ain't nobody getting ejected from furry just for having one too many birthdays. Heck, even if we wanted to do that, how? We can't even reliably manage to keep out the genuinely problematic folks as it is, but that's a conversation for another day. Instead, what's more than likely happening is you don't find the memes and trends coming from the new generation as funny or immediately relatable as they used to be, and so it feels like they're no longer for you to enjoy. And perhaps that's true, but to think about that as any sort of conscious effort to alienate you and your generation is both misguided and self-centered. The reality is, younger folks are too caught up in their own world to give much thought to how you feel about the things they enjoy. And that's how it always has been and how it always will be. Tell me you didn't feel the same way at that age. Which leaves you with two options. You could just let them enjoy their stuff while you continue to enjoy what you enjoy, but don't get resentful if a lack of overlap means that there ends up being a rift between you. On the other hand, if what you really want is to be able to engage with the younger generations, that means you have to be the one who makes an effort to keep up, instead of expecting things to be handed to you. It means doing a little extra research when something new pops up on your timeline, so you're better informed about what's going on outside of your generational bubble. In all likelihood, you'll find yourself somewhere in between, enjoying some of these new trends while ignoring others, and that's fine. The most important thing is that you're genuine about all this, or you risk finding yourself in a real fellow kids situation. But if there's really only one takeaway here, it's that claiming there's some sort of age limit within the fandom only serves to add drama and conflict to a community already laden with it. The end result is paranoia on one end of the spectrum and resentment on the other. Don't mistake this as me saying that the young folks have all the answers. They certainly ain't infallible, nor is anyone at that age. They'll hopefully figure it out eventually, and those of us who've been around a while, who really should know better, can help with that. I know they're trite, but sayings like age ain't nothing but a number and you're only as old as you feel really couldn't be more true here. And, as is the case with many of the things that make us feel self-conscious, nobody cares about it nearly as much as we ourselves do. And the sooner we can let go of that baggage, the better our time here in the fandom will be. Thanks for watching, stay safe, vote, and I'll catch y'all later. Nice.